Brian and Kenzie in the morning. And Chicago's alternative all day.
Q101.
Kenzie's Krimes.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a North Side apartment.
Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
This is evil, what those people have done to me.
C says Heaven's Gate awaiting.
I'm not guilty.
Q101.
Brian and Kenzie on Q101. Time for Kenzie's Krimes, where Kenzie takes us on a journey through mystery and drama and intrigue and murder of a local crime. And me and Case the producer don't know anything of what she's going to talk about. So, Kenzie, I throw it to you. Let's go.
Now, Holly Staker was a young, sweet 11-year-old girl who lived in Waukegan. On the summer evening of August 17th, 1992, Holly was babysitting two younger children in the 400 block of Hickory Street when a suspect entered the apartment. She was then assaulted and stabbed to death.
Oh, my God. Right off the bat?
I know. I'm sorry to do that. I know we get into it, but there's just so much more to the story that I got to get you there.
All right.
Now, 10 weeks later, as a result from a tip from an informant, investigators began focusing in on Juan Rivera. He was a 19-year-old former special education student who had been convicted of burglary. And at the time was actually kind of like on a monitored bracelet for that.
Yeah.
During 4 days of questioning, Juan Rivera denied knowledge of the crime. But at the end of the fourth day, around midnight, after the interrogation became accusatory, he broke down crying and nodded when asked if he had killed Holly Staker. The interrogation continued until 3 a.m., so 3 more hours after the breakdown. Then investigators left to type a confession for him to sign. Minutes later, jail personnel saw Rivera beating his head against the wall of his cell. They then took him to a padded cell, where an hour later, a nurse again found him beating his head against the wall and speaking incoherently. And seemingly unaware of where he was. A little later, the nurse once again went back to check on him and found him laying on the floor in a fetal position. He had pulled out hair from his scalp and skin was still attached.
Ew, gross.
The nurse concluded he was suffering from a psychotic episode.
Yeah.
However, this did not stop interrogation and continuation of him being there. 8 a.m. rolls around. Investigators took a typed confession that they had prepared to the padded cell and then had Rivera sign it. The document, however, was a narrative account of what the investigators claimed Rivera had told them. It was so incoherent and so impossible that the Lake County State's Attorney, Michael Waller, instructed investigators to resume the interrogation in an effort to clear up inconsistencies. Now, despite Rivera's obvious fragile mental condition, the interrogation resumed at 11:30 a.m. About 90 minutes later, Rivera signed the second confession, which contains something a little more plausible and realistic of the crime. I mean, at this point, this is just mental torture.
Yeah.
He's been manipulated for 4 days.
Yeah, those guys said, we got to close this. And he's, that's how they look at it. He could be faking. I'm sure he wasn't. Who knows? But they go through it. They got to get this. We got this guy on the edge. He already said it. Let's get him to say it again. And then boom, we're done.
Based primarily on the confession, because there wasn't much else. The confession, the tip, things like that. A jury found Rivera guilty in his first trial in 1993. Prosecutors asked for the death sentence. Now, mind you, there's not much here to prove it against him, right? And they asked for a death sentence. Luckily, the jury rejected it. But Judge Christopher C. Stark sentenced Rivera to life in prison without parole. I'm going to pause right there.
All right.
Because the journey that they go on from here, especially with that judge, I was floored. And I have to say, something that was found out later about what they did to put him in prison is wild to me. You want to talk about fake? This is the fakest of the fake that I've ever seen.
All right. And we'll have the conclusion coming up here in about 3 minutes. Brian and Kenzie on Q101.
The Brian and Kenzie Show.
On Q101.
Brian and Kenzie on Q101 with the conclusion of Kenzie's Krimes. Kenzie left us with a cliffhanger of all cliffhangers.
Sorry.
That's okay. And we're going to finish it up right now. And I don't know if you need to do a brief recap of what happened.
Yeah, I'm going to do a brief recap. We are talking about the unfortunate murder of Holly Staker when she was babysitting August 17th, 1992. An anonymous tip basically led to Juan Rivera, who was essentially, I don't want to even say interrogated, I want to say tortured for 4 days until led to confession, literally just based off of this tip, essentially. Okay, so he confessed even though he had been beating his head against the wall and was having a diagnosed psychiatric episode. Okay, so he was given life in prison without parole. Now, in 1996, an Illinois court reversed that conviction based on improper rulings. Basically, that first judge, Christopher C. Stark, he totally didn't give him a chance to defend himself in trial, which is, illegal, unlawful, whatever. 2 years later, Rivera again was tried and convicted and sentenced to life in prison by the same judge. So the same judge, the judge doesn't give you basically a fair trial, so to speak, and you say it has to happen again, and they give you the same judge. That's crazy. The conviction was actually then reversed by that judge again, because after the Center of Wrongful Convictions obtained DNA testing evidence, and it eliminated Rivera as a source of DNA.
Wow.
So they were able to find DNA in that Holly Stark case, right? That was not his DNA. So whoever attacked this girl was clearly not him. Different DNA was there, not his at all.
That's why DNA is pretty awesome.
However...
Oh, no, it's not awesome.
Despite the DNA exclusion from the crime scene, the initial prosecutors chose to retry the case on May 8th, 2009. And a third jury found him guilty, and that same judge sentenced him to life in prison for a third time.
Well, that judge is pretty busy. Or they have no one else to come in there in that case.
What is going on? This poor man. So he was, at the time, at that third trial, he was represented by a team of lawyers from the Center of Wrongful Convictions. Now, that very team went back and to appeal this conviction once again. Based primarily on the second confession, a jury found Rivera guilty at his first trial in 1993. Now, this team was now leading the appeal on this third conviction. Not only did they have proof that other DNA was found at the scene and not Juan Rivera's, his attorneys had long argued that the Waukegan police and Lake County prosecutors manipulated and even fabricated evidence to win and preserve a faulty conviction. Prosecutors claimed that the victim's blood was found on Rivera's tennis shoes. So they were saying that blood was found on Rivera's tennis shoes that belonged to Holly. It was later discovered that that type of shoe wasn't even available. On top of it, during further DNA evidence, the blood of Holly that was found on the shoe also included the DNA evidence of the person who did it.
Well, that's good.
So while trying to plant evidence on Juan, it had the real killer on his shoe. After nearly 2 decades in prison, Juan Rivera was finally exonerated in 2012. He also received $20 million.
Well,
I know.
20 years for 20 mil.
So $1 million a year for the wrongful conviction.
I'm trying to decide if that'd be cool. I'd be cool with that.
Would you be into it?
He's how old? Probably, maybe
He was in his 40s at the time he was released.
40s. So you get out in your 40s, you have 20 mil.
How do you feel? So listen, now Waukegan's share of that, because that was kind of like the large, that was the police force basically on the case, was $7.5 million. It was the largest share of the $20 million due to the irresponsible officers who handled the case, kind of a punishment, so to speak. It's mainly your fault, you're getting a big part of it. Waukegan mayor at the time, Wayne Motley, I'm not sure, sorry, said insurance will cover only part of its payout, meaning taxpayers had to foot some of this bill.
What?
And I quote from the mayor, "It's very inappropriate for them to do what they did. I'm not happy."
Well, that's good.
Now, to this day, Juan Rivera does have a family and a job at Northwestern, but says, to say that $20 million is a wonderful thing, of course, I can live more comfortably now, and so can my family. I can go to college and get my education the way I've always wanted, but I would still prefer 20 years with my family. As we all know, there is kind of like a prisoner's code. They've talked about that. This was harm to a child.
Yeah.
And he didn't do it. He talks about the horrific things that he went through in prison because of what people thought that he did. This is one of the longest wrongful convictions of all time.
Wow.
One of them, at least on the books. I'm sure there's many out there that we don't know about because they have never been exonerated the way this man was.
So did they ever catch the killer?
They have DNA evidence, and there are leads on who they believe that is. but he has not been imprisoned. They've not released that name. I don't know if they're building a case against him or something, but from what I've seen, that's what I gathered.
Kenzie's Crimes.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a north side apartment.
Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
This is evil, what those people had done to me.
See, says Heaven's Gate away team.
I'm not guilty.
Q101.
Well, there you have another Kenzie's Crimes in the books. If you came in the middle of it or near the end, it will all be on the podcast later on today, the Brian and Kenzie podcast, Q101.com, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. So you can catch, if you caught the end and you go, wait, what was going on there? You can go hear from the beginning there later on. Another great one. God, these are wild.
They are wild. I fall down these like wells of stories in the middle of the night making these, and it's always a crazy ride.
Yeah. And like I said, we were off a couple days, and I fell into one that's not a Chicago-based one, but that documentary about the Scott Peterson stuff on Netflix.
I watched that too. You watched that?
I felt like I needed a Kenzie Crimes fix, even though it wasn't Kenzie's Crimes. It was
You're jonesing, baby.
It was a crime, though. Holy cow, that documentary is just terrifying. Remembering it in real time and then going back on the doc is just, whoa. I forgot the mistress got up there and was shaking and saying...
I felt so bad for her. That docuseries is very well done if anyone's interested in watching it.
Yeah, check it out. So coming up, on a more positive note, if you missed the Offspring keyword, we'll give you that again coming up here in about 6 minutes for your chance to go see the Offspring at the Metro. It is the Q101 pop-up with the Offspring. Come out and play with us in Wintrust Community Bank at the Metro on September 19th. So we'll give you that keyword again. If you missed it, your chance to get in. The only way to get in is with this keyword coming up here in 6 minutes.
The Brian and Kenzie Show.
On Q101.